Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Good evening, alums and friends. I'm Amy Brandt, an MIT alum myself and a proud parent of a current MIT student, and also director and publisher at the MIT Press, and I'll serve as your host this evening.
And
Jessica?
I'm Jessica Quay. I graduated last year from the EECS department. I spent the past year at Tsinghua University as a Schwarzman Scholar, and I've since returned to MIT for graduate school.
Welcome. So we're delighted to have a panel of several MIT faculty this evening. Angela Belcher, Head, Department of Biological Engineering. Sylvia Sire, Professor of Chemistry. Penny Chisholm, Institute Professor, Departments of Civil and Environmental Engineering and Biology. And Mandana Sasanfar, Lecturer, Diversity and Outreach, Department of Biology. And you can learn more about our speakers and moderators on the event website. We really regret that Nancy Hopkins, who was originally part of this lineup, is unable to join tonight's panel. So we're here to discuss the 2020 film Picture a Scientist, directed by Ian Chaney, a 2015 MIT Knight Science Journalism Fellow, and Sharon Shattuck. And I have a particular interest in this film, was involved in conceiving the idea for it, and then served as its executive producer. I hope you've had a chance to see the film, which is now streaming on both Netflix and PBS Nova. And there's also a short version of the film called The Uprising, pertaining specifically to the MIT part of the story, that you can find on the MIT Press website. Jessica.
Some opening questions for our panelists. For those tuning in live, please use the Q&A tool found below or next to the live stream window to either ask or vote questions.
So Penny, I'll start with you if you don't mind. When Nancy was asked in an earlier interview what she hoped viewers would take away from the film, she said, "I hope people will better understand why women are underrepresented in science, and women of color particularly so." Do you think the film has had or is having this impact based on the conversations it has engendered on university campuses?
Unmute. Sorry, have to unmute. I certainly hope it has. I know I was really surprised by the emails I got from former students saying, you know, they showed the film in our department. I never thought I would, you know, I would see that. And so the general message I would get was how it sort of put on the table the possibility to talk about these things in places where I'm an oceanographer, and you know, it's a field that has been incredibly male dominated historically, and so I think it's had a big effect in terms of making the conversation possible.
Thank you.
For your response, Professor Chisholm. Professor Sayre, I was so struck by the courage and activism back in the 1990s that I saw in the film. Particularly, I really admire Professor Hopkins's outreach to other female faculties within other female faculty members within the science department at MIT, and the way they all rallied together to take on the MIT admin at the time. From my own experience, I don't see students who are suffering to that same degree taking such actions today. And so I would like to know, how do you think we can instill that spirit that Professor Hopkins demonstrated in the next generation of female scientists and engineers, not just at top universities like MIT, but also across the world?
Yeah. Well, I really have to say that I think Nancy is a special human being in her ability to bring people around her and to get a consensus. I mean, there really is something special about Nancy. But also the thing is that her discussions were so they hit a nerve on all of the women at MIT, and in particular the School of Science in the mid 1990s. It's really hard not to respond when you hear her individual concerns and issues, and they just resonate with a lot of your own experiences. And so the time was ripe to have this come to a head. And then as a group, and this was an amazing group of women, and let me say that I don't think we really knew each other when we came together in the mid 1990s. We certainly knew of each other, but we never interacted in any way. But it was just it was kind of magic, and all the synthesis was there for this, just coming together of discussing all of the issues and all of the concerns, and oh yeah, I feel that too. And it was something special during that time.
Thank you. So Mandana, you do a lot of work in biology and also in brain and cognitive sciences, attracting diverse students to MIT and helping guide them through their time here. You've said that you measure your own success according to how many of them choose an academic career path. So in your view, what makes for a good mentor in science at any stage?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're muted, Mandana.
Sorry, let me unmute myself. I think depending on the stage, from undergrad to postdocs, individuals need different type of mentoring and advising. But I think what's important is for the mentor to be able to inspire the students to be the best they can, and being supportive. And what's most important is when the students struggle, because it's easy, to be a fairly good mentor when everything goes well. It's when the students hit a roadblock or have personal problems or need real attention that a mentor can make the difference. And really, the experience that a student will have with a mentor will really encourage them to continue and be like their mentor or want to do research, or it could be turned off. So I think we do a pretty good job here at MIT with really outstanding faculty mentors. And I think that's why the students are really inspired and then go on to do PhDs. And a number of them, I would say around 15% right now of our summer students are now faculty at some institutions.
Wow. Thank you.
15%. Statistic. Thank you for sharing, Professor Mandana. Professor Belcher, as someone studying electrical engineering and computer science, I'm interested in your view on the ways in which the struggles and the achievements documented in the film might apply to women in technology, as opposed to women in academic science, particularly those in industry research roles. Could you please share your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you, Jessica. I think a lot of the underlying ideas and challenges would be the same between academia and in industry, and probably in other aspects in government as well. And so, because I've never really been in industry, I've been in academia my whole life. I'm comfortable to talk about that. And in that case, I'd say that I think there's been great strides at MIT. I got to MIT in 2002, and so I got after the reports came out, and it was a really good time to come to MIT. And actually, when I was thinking about moving from my other institution to MIT, people go, wait a minute, don't do that. Did you see the report? Did you see this? And what I was thinking is yes, but they're talking about it. It's something that's out in the open. And I think that you can say that. I think that report and also I think this film will have an impact on people talking about it more, bringing it to the surface. And I think that when we try to get leadership roles in industry and more board members for women and underrepresented groups, it's something that's being talked about right now. So I see a lot of similarities between those. I do think that the amazing work that was done by Nancy and other members on this panel to bring this to light in science, and when they brought it to light in science, it was brought to light in engineering and the other schools on campus, and has made a big impact on how we think on a day-to-day basis in terms of equity with faculty. And because we do have so many ties to industry and other parts of the world around science and technology, I think that that's made an impact as well. So I hope I answered that question. I don't have as much day-to-day experience in that, but I see a lot of challenges that are the same.
I think you did do. I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up question. You mentioned that you came to MIT right after the reports had been released. And so you've seen MIT's progress over the years, over the past 18, 20 years. What would you say? I guess you can't necessarily quantify MIT's progress, but does it meet the expectations that you had? Do you think there's still more to be done? Of course, there's always more to be done, but how do you think MIT has performed relative to your expectations coming in?
So absolutely, there's more to be done. But it's active in our day-to-day thoughts, our absolute day-to-day thoughts. I've only been department head of biological engineering for less than 3 years. But when I became department head in biological engineering, there was one other department head that was a female in School of Engineering, my colleague, Paula Hammond. And now there's, I think, 5 women that are department heads in School of Engineering. And so, yes, should we have done that 20 years ago? Should we have done it 10 years ago? No, are we doing that now? But it's not just that. It's not just about having the women as department heads or in leadership positions at MIT in this particular kind of example. It's about having other people in these roles that are helping make the decisions and the path forward that care so much about increase of diversity and equity at all stages and all paths. Yeah, are we where I hope we be? Not yet. Are we making progress? I'd say definitely.
Thank you. And that's a great lead into the question I was going to ask Sylvia, really about the numbers and the progress, because according to MIT's diversity dashboard, women now account for 24.5% of all faculty and 19.6% of all full professors. So there's definitely been progress, but I think if you were to ask any members of the group behind the 1999 report, they might say not enough by far. But Sylvia, do you envision this trend continuing to grow? And if so, what's making it possible, and what's making it proceed so slowly?
Yeah, I think, one of the important aspects of the report is that it just raised the community's consciousness about the role of women and about the role of minorities, and that consciousness has continued to increase, and things are making progress, but also the numbers are increasing, but they are increasing slowly. But I also just want to point out that I think more attitudes need to be changed. It's not just about the number of women or the number of minorities that are in leadership roles. It's also about changing attitudes. And that is much harder to quantify. But it's really, really important. And so, we need to keep talking about these issues. We need to keep raising that level of consciousness about the issues. That's at the heart of the matter. We, as a group, we we talked a lot about, we use the word marginalization, right? And it's that marginalization that we got to do something about. I mean, that's at the heart of the matter. And once we can do something about that, then I think the numbers will increase more rapidly.
Yeah, so you're talking about deep cultural issues,
Right.
right? Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and attitudes for sure. Yeah, more we can talk about there. I want to say also for the audience benefit, we're going to go through a couple more questions, and then we're seeing lots of questions from the audience come in, and we'll have a bit more discussion among the panelists. But let's proceed with a couple of the questions that we had prepared. Jessica, over to you.
Thank you, Amy. Professor Chisholm, I'm curious about your reactions to the 2018 National Academy of Science report on sexual harassment in academic science, engineering, and medicine. The reports reported little progress in these areas, and I'm wondering what your reactions to that would be.
Very sad.
And your thoughts on ways that we could actually stimulate more.
I mean, you know, that was something that we were back in the day, back in the uprising, that wasn't an issue that we were so busy just sort of trying to get an equitable piece of the pie, that wasn't even an issue we were dealing with. But it's a huge issue, but I think a lot of progress is starting to be made on that, because again, people are having the courage to take it on, and that obviously comes out in the film. Some of the courageous efforts of people that have come forward, and so I think there's definitely been a tipping point in that regard. So I expect that as we move forward, there will be fewer of those issues. But the challenges of numbers and attitudes still remain. I was heartened to see that in the School of Engineering. I saw some statistics just yesterday that 44% of the new hires were women in the faculty in the School of Engineering. So that doesn't get to your question, but I wanted to slip that in as a positive thing.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's also relates to the question that I want to pose to Angie now about, and so in the leaky pipeline in the field of biology, you know, we see 60% of undergrads being female in biology, drops to 50% in grad school, 40% at the postdoc level. So how do we understand the leaky pipeline and what we can do about it?
Yeah, the numbers that you mentioned were similar in biological engineering, and I think we have 80% undergraduate women that are undergraduates, and then a little less than 50% in graduate students, and then for postdocs it drops off quite a bit, and for faculty as well. And I think that is partly around for the postdocs and the women faculty is kind of actively recruiting in women and for postdocs and for graduate, for postdocs and for faculty. I think that at MIT we have and you know, maybe historically for good reason, we have this this idea that maybe that you don't always have the work-life balance, and you don't have the flexibility in the faculty position, and you know, I think that one of the things that's most desirable, there's a lot of things most desirable about being a professor. One is that you spend time with students. You know, teaching is absolutely by far the best thing. It's the best thing about being at MIT is working with MIT students and in the classrooms, in the labs. But there's an amazing amount of flexibility ability to direct your life and your career as a faculty member. And I think getting that information across in terms of the being able to do multiple things like the work-life balance, which is really, really important to me. And so I think it's part of a messaging. So actively building an environment that's inclusive, one that people feel comfortable in. That's one. Actively recruiting, and then also maybe getting the message out more about with the great benefits of the job. I did want to say something about we talked about numbers, but then we talked about things that were harder to give numbers to. I think that's something that I thought was really amazing about the film, is just people's description about how they felt marginalized. It wasn't like Nancy could measure it with a tape measure, but these other things are not measurable and are not reported in the same way. And I think that's one of the tricky part, very tricky parts.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Professor Belcher. I did want to wish you good luck convincing people about work-life balance at a place like MIT. Yeah,
I can expand if you want.
Right. No, I do. I see where you're coming from, that it is possible. I did also want to comment that I think it's less about convincing people to get in. Like, that is an important problem, but more important is keeping people in there, which is what I think the Picture Scientist movie really shed a lot of light on. Like, Professor Hopkins was a professor at the time that she was suffering that. Professor Willenberg was a grad student. So like, they had made it to that hurdle. Just letting them clear it was the problem. And that's what made it challenging. So I think there are two problems here that we need to solve. Yeah, just wanted to highlight that. Thank you for sharing though. I think sometimes the qualitative data is lost, but it shouldn't be. Thank you for highlighting that. Okay, Dr. Sasan-Far, I would like to ask you a question. For the alums tuning in and perhaps the men in our alum network, how do you think men can be better allies when it comes to leveling the playing field in STEM fields and careers?
Well, I can say from my personal experience, I have had 4 mentors, through my undergrad and graduate school and postdoc and even in industry, who were all men, white men, and they did a tremendous job. I mean, they were fair. They had a lot of other women who ended up, being chair of departments, head of companies. So my point is, I think it's individuals training their belief. I mean, these men, had kids, they had daughters. They really felt that if you have it in you to succeed, then they should give you all the opportunity you need to succeed. So I don't know what the message should be, because I think the message should be the same for men and women, is that you should basically help students go as far as they can and be there for them when they need. And some students, we need more attention than others. Some will want to be scientists and some might not want to be scientists. But I think the role of mentors, again, regardless of gender, is to be there and be role models and be fair and provide what is needed for students to get to the next step and be successful.
Thank you. So now we're gonna turn to a number of audience questions that have come in, and instead of directing them at individuals, we'll just put it out to the panel, whoever would like to respond, and even, if you have questions for one another around the topics raised by the audience questioner. So the first question we have is from Samantha. Is science better off than engineering in regard to these issues? And how are the two similar or different in terms of presenting hurdles to women? And really anyone on the panel who wants to speak to that.
I think it has to do a lot with culture, because I have noticed that if you go to other countries, there are more women in engineering sometimes that you see compared to this country. I'm thinking specifically about, for example, India, where you might have a lot of engineers, women engineers, Eastern Europe, So I think part of it is the culture at the middle school and high school level that might encourage or not women to continue into these fields.
I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but I do think the School of Engineering has made more progress at MIT in terms of women from the time we started the uprising till now. I think the numbers have gone up more in engineering. I'm not sure why, but
Do you think it has to do with the likelihood of career paths outside of academia? Do you think it's something about science and academia per se, or?
could be. I think maybe cultural too. I don't know.
Thanks. Okay. I don't know if other panelists want to comment on that. We have a comment from Trisha. Jessica, do you want to?
Yes, I can share the comment from Tricia, one of our audience members. Tricia says, I run FIRST robotics teams, and I showed the film to my high school boys to show them how they need to be active bystanders to keep things that happened to me, from happening to women they will work with. I think I personally just want to say I really admire that, Tricia. Thank you for actively showing people of the opposite sex what we go through sometimes as women, and how and encouraging them actually to guard against doing that to other people. Yeah, I would yeah.
Then Trisha goes on to say, I've suggested to MIT, the alumni head, that a similar study of women graduates is needed to see why we leave our careers so often. I don't know any of my classmates who are still in the workforce from 1990. And so an interesting study, I guess, of career trajectories of students. I have all kinds of thoughts about that. We had missed an earlier comment from Stephanie before we go on to, do you want to take that, Jessica? And then we'll
Yes, I do. Because it really resonates with me. Stephanie says, one of Nancy's concluding remarks in the film, summarizing her contributions, was, such a waste of time and energy when all you wanted to be was a scientist. That's what it's really all about. It's about the science. And I think that's something that many women face, not just those in graduate school, even those at the undergraduate level, just coming to the place to be like, I came here for engineering, I came here for science. Why are there all these barriers? So Stephanie, your comment resonates with me personally, and I'm sure with many other people on today's call. Thank you for sharing and highlighting that remark made by Professor Hopkins.
The next one actually is a question. Bibit or Bibit, if I'm pronouncing the name right. Male colleagues mostly express disgust at the idea of sexism, but don't realize how they perpetuate it. Any guidance from the panelists that could help male colleagues see the nuances of sexism in our society? Like what me and white supremacy does for racism. That's a tough one. Any of the panelists want to comment on that and their own experiences?
I think that this film does really help to see it expressed by people that have gone through it at different stages of their careers. I also watched, this isn't for a colleague, but I also watched it with my teenage son. I tried to watch it with my 11-year-old, but it was too stressful. But I think that there are people that just don't know about it, doesn't know it exists, and I think the film is fantastic for that. But I also think that there's other films that are in role playing that's done as well, when it's not actually someone but it's an actor representing someone showing an experience. And we have those through MIT, and I found those to be very, very helpful as well when viewing those as a group or just viewing them by myself, where I can see a situation, someone expressing it that I hadn't realized before.
Thank you for sharing, Professor Belcher. I do think the conversations that we have with people after watching the documentary in a group setting certainly do have a huge impact. Okay, I will go on to Stephanie's question now. Stephanie's, oh, sorry. Did you have something to say?
Yeah,
Okay,
can I just
please
add
go ahead. Please go
Yes.
ahead. Thank you.
to give some our male colleagues here some encouragement. I should point out that during our uprising here, there were 1 to 2 male colleagues who are really quite essential in helping us through this whole process. In some colleagues that actually went to talk to the administrators about maybe you should listen to the complaints that are coming through. Some of our male colleagues actually helped us get some of the data. So we owe them a bit of gratitude here. And it's just an example of how your male colleagues can make a difference.
Thank you for sharing, Professor Sayer. And I do want to echo Dr. Sasanfar's sentiment that she shared earlier. I also personally have had much better experiences with my male professors at MIT than some of the females. So yeah, credits to all the male professors out there supporting female students. Yeah. Okay, I'll ask Stephanie's question now. There is no false dichotomy between science and the people doing the science. How can we get to a place where we as a community fully value what Nancy and others did, fully value that what Nancy and others did was in fact science? That this type of work is just as important a contribution towards advancing the field as papers that are published. If we can't value this work properly as science within the academic system, how can we incentivize change?
Yeah, I'd love to hear people's views on that. I really agree with you, Stephanie, on that. And there's a lot of very important science that's done, and quantitative studies of science. I'm seeing more and more of it, really looking at the data and understanding, through different types of analyses, the impact of the work of women scientists versus men scientists, the citation patterns. This was all about the data. It really was, and it is a science. I think I see some raised hands in the panelists if anybody else wants to comment.
I just wanted to add that I think the work on unconscious bias has just been so, which you're alluding to there, has been so powerful in changing minds. I've seen aha moments among colleagues, not just men. I mean, women. Well, we all have it, but I think as women we experience it, so it's right in the forefront of our minds. But when we were doing the work years ago, there were many conversations with colleagues, male colleagues, and you describe, things that happened to you. They found it difficult to believe, but then they believed it, and that it was aha moments. Oh my goodness, how is that possible? How could I not have noticed that? So, but yeah, I think the unconscious bias work has really changed the lay of the land.
Yeah. Any other panelists want to comment before we move on to, we have lots of audience questions.
I'll just comment quickly that I agree with both. It was an amazing question. I agree with both Amy and Penny's answer. But one of the reasons that it was effective, the report, was that it was based on data and data generated. And at MIT, it's, we look at data, we like data and value it. the terms and the question in terms of how do you get credit for doing that kind of work, which I think that was part of the question. What I'm seeing more and more of is, that's considered part of service. That's considered part of valuable contributions to the field and to the, in this case at MIT, to the university. And that goes towards credit for service for promotions and for being put up for awards, because it's not just about the number of papers that you've published or different things you've done in science and engineering, but what have you done for the community? How have you improved the community, both on campus and in the world? And so I think that is becoming a more integrated part of evaluation is not necessarily the right word, but part of the whole package of what it means to be a faculty member, at least.
Yeah, thanks. You reminded me of when we were initially going out to enlist faculty to participate in the film and be interviewed. And I spoke to a number of younger female faculty at MIT. Part of the reaction that I got from some of them is, I don't want to be associated with this kind of work because I feel like it will count against me in some way to be associated with this kind of activism or this kind of work. So, I mean, there is still that element too. So yes, is the contribution and the service around it, but there's still, some resistance. So the next question is from April. What can we do or say to help the men in our lives who want to be an ally feel inspired to speak up when they see discrimination? That's a big question. I think, we're having lots of conversations on campus around allyship in general, right? And how do you go from being a bystander to acts of harassment and discrimination to being part of the solution and being a good ally? And we have to speak up for ourselves. Yeah.
So I think you need to stand up. You need to call it as it is. And, I've been in many instances in the last 5-6 years where things have occurred and, my male colleagues have not stepped up. And, it's really, it's really concerning to me. Even with all of this kind of discussion about these issues, there's still this hesitancy to just come forward and say, look, this isn't right. And we need them and ourselves. We all need to do that.
It's true. Thank you. We have a question from David. Over to Jessica.
Thank you, Amy. David says, my daughter just started as a first-year student in mechanical engineering at UIUC. We watched the film together as a family. What actionable advice do the panelists have for her?
Stand up for herself. And be confident. I think the key thing is to trust herself and not to, I was looking at the film and some of the concerns, putting down and being excluded. So I think if she has self-confidence and trust, and I think a lot of this is built through being a teenager and how supportive your parents are and your teachers are. I think if you have enough of that self-confidence and trust, I think you'll do fine.
Isn't there also something about, forming those relationships with other women in the Department of Mechanical Engineering and comparing notes, because it seems like part of what happened at MIT was the collegiality around the effort. At first, the women didn't know one another and they made those connections, and they were comparing stories and notes, and that was very empowering. So
The other thing that's important is to find a mentor. So a trusted ear that you can talk to get a reality check if you have a reaction to something.
That's what I was going to say as well. I wasn't sure from the question whether she was a first year undergraduate, but I think that having developing relationships with people in the department, whether it's your academic advisor, if you're an undergraduate, or people on your committee, if you're a graduate student, your career development committee, if you're a junior faculty, is absolutely key to have people that you can always go speak to, whether in any gender, you can go speak to, who knows that you can say anything to them and they have your back. And that's absolutely critical, because I remember as a junior faculty member or a graduate student or undergraduate student being afraid to tell anyone anything. And it makes everything, scary and unknown. So I think that's absolutely critical. And I do know at MIT, that's something that we try to do at the undergraduate level for all our students, is have academic advisors that you can always go to. And if you're not assigned an academic advisor at MIT or other places, go into the office of a professor in your department, in the class that you're taking. Go to office hours, try to meet that person, as a person, and find someone that you're comfortable with. And I just think that most people are not going to turn you away. Most people are professors because they like teaching, they like students, they like people, and they want to have those kinds of connections. And I think that is absolutely key. The allies that you have for years and decades.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Professor Belcher. I just want to give a huge shout out to my academic advisor, Professor Leslie Kelbling. I think she embodies a lot of the things that we've discussed here today. Like, she has been an excellent advisor, not just for personal, but also professional, academic, just across the board. And I'm just very, very grateful to have her in the EECS department. I hope that there are other people who are fortunate enough to work with incredible professors like her. Thank you.
thank you.
Over to Amy.
The next two are comments leading up to a question. But we'll go through those two. Belinda commented, I was a 90s undergrad at MIT, and MIT's layout made it clear that women were tolerated but not excluded. There were 0 women's restrooms in the Infinite Corridor. I remember that too. I think there was one little one. To go, I hiked up to the 2nd floor and back down, late to class. My grad school wasn't like that at all. And then I think Jessica, I'll just push through the next one and then leave the question to you. And then Anita commented, as a woman minority in engineering, I feel like there's a disproportionate burden being placed on us to do the job of recruiting other women minorities to STEM. This is wrong in so many ways. And I'm glad that the film touches on that. But actually, maybe Mandana, you have something to say about that.
So that's a tough one, because students like to find a community that they are comfortable with. So when you have so few minority students and you want to recruit more minority students, and you want those minority students to feel at home, you have to rely on the very few. So the problem is really the numbers here. So I understand completely the feeling of the student, but at the same time, they become key in recruiting, and as the numbers grow, then the needs decrease. But at the beginning, it's very hard when you are just a few and you are representing basically the, a group.
Okay.
So you need a critical mass.
Professor Sayer, please go ahead.
Well, I can report that there are now 2 women's bathrooms on the first floor of the corridor since the 90s.
Yeah. It's progress.
Thank you for the statistic, Professor Sayer. Professor Belcher, please go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I've heard about, the students in the 90s and these experiments, the women students, and it's, gosh, I just apologize, for that. That's not acceptable on any level. And I feel like that, we are making progress in, we have the 2 bathrooms, I guess, but we are making progress on being a much more inclusive community. But I just wanted to just acknowledge how shocking, that is to me.
Thank you.
I can report for building 68, which is the biology building. There has many men, has women bathrooms on every floor. So at least there is equity in this area.
Good. Jessica, I think the next question is yours.
She seems to be doing a good job with the balancing of bathrooms. I'm glad to hear that. I just quickly, before I go to the next question, I wanted to loop back to what Dr. Sasan-Far said earlier, which was about, essentially what she said is you can't be what you can't see. And in my junior year at MIT, I had a traumatizing experience with a professor. And the first person that I reached out to was a Black female professor at MIT, Professor Ama Edo. I did not know her from anywhere, never spoken to her, but because she looked like what I felt comfortable with, I was able to open up to her, and that made so much of a difference. Being able to open up to her, get her support, get her feedback. She's still one of my biggest mentors and supporters and advocates at MIT. I think it's really important. So Anita, I understand that sometimes it's a disproportionate burden, but I also think that you should see yourself as a guiding light or as an inspiration to someone who is trying to come into the field. Yes. Shout out to Professor Edo. Okay, moving on. Tai Siok. I may have screwed up the name. I'm sorry about that. Tai says, as a dad of a teenage girl interested in STEM, an alum of Chris Prather's lab, whose physical lab at MIT is the same as Dr. Nancy Hopkins' old lab, and an educator, I feel diversity is still a big issue in academia. Could you please provide more insights?
It's a big open-ended question for any of the panelists.
I'll take a stab at it just because I want to interject something that I talked to Nancy this afternoon, and one thing that she's been working on really hard in the last decade or so is I hate to end on a negative note, but the lack of women in biotech companies. And as much progress as we've made in academia when it comes to money and power, and we're not there yet. And Nancy gave me some statistics, and you can Google an article. Nancy and her team have been working on this. There's an article called 40 Missing Companies. And what that refers to is that if women and male faculty in the departments of biology, chemistry, bioengineering at MIT, if all of them founded companies at the same rate, there'd be 40 more companies. And the statistics are shocking. There are 26 MIT faculty in biology, chemical engineering, co-founded 27 companies with other faculty, and they were all men. So I think there are 2 companies founded by women out of 57 in the biology department. So we have a long way to go there in terms of representation at those levels of power and money. So I don't want us to end on that note, but I wanted to interject that for Nancy because she's been working so hard. I mean, she took that on after all of what she's done for us in academia, and things are changing. I mean, some men have stepped up to help. I mean, things are really changing. It was one of those things that nobody was noticing. And now suddenly looking at the numbers, oh my goodness, they're noticing. So
Yeah, it's getting better. And I know Nancy had mentioned to me that she's been, working with Sangeeta Bhatia and Susan Hotfield in this area as well. Angie.
I definitely agree with that comment. And having founded a couple of companies myself, we did notice. But as hard as have found navigating academia, I've found navigating the biotech startup and starting companies even more difficult. And so I think the barriers are can be even greater. And so what Sangeeta and Nancy and Susan are doing, as well as other people around the country, I think is fantastic for increasing women entrepreneurs.
Thank you. We have a question from Karen. There clearly was discrimination, but it helped to have a science dean and an MIT president who are open to hearing criticism and dealing with it. Leadership matters. Is there a way to ensure that MIT has the right type of leaders? Yeah, where do we begin with that one? I mean, that's a big question. Yeah, Penny.
just very briefly, I don't know how you ensure it, but I certainly have seen a dramatic change since the uprising, from from these issues being something that nobody wanted to recognize or deal with, to suddenly the landscape changed where men in power that didn't have the sensibilities about these issues were not looked upon as good leaders. And we used to joke about it, that that person was a good guy who gets it, and suddenly being a good guy who gets it was an asset in terms of promotion and department heads and all that. So I mean, we saw that in our, I'm really sounding old now, but anyway, in our lifetime, we saw that change, and that has just been so wonderful. So men who rise to those positions now have to appreciate these unconscious biases and the challenges of increasing numbers for women and minorities, et cetera. And that wasn't true before.
Yeah.
I think it's also mentorship in leadership. And when just going to my own example of being department head in the School of Engineering, and I looked and saw someone else that was doing it and doing a great job, and getting mentorship from people around leadership, I think is absolutely critical. And I think it's supporting people in leadership positions as they move along, whether it's an associate department head to a department head to a dean. It's also kind of similar as learning, going from a graduate student to undergraduate to a grad student to a postdoc. There's a mentorship involved with it to prevent people to take these positions as well, because and giving them the ability to create something in that position that they're proud of and that they represent. And so I think it's support and mentorship, and those are two major things.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Professor Belcher. I will ask the next question from Professor Ed Bershinger. And Professor Bershinger says, Asking the woman to be more confident is seeking an individualist solution to a collective problem. The system, not the woman, needs fixing. Why not ask the leaders in charge to prioritize equity? That seems to take some courage these days.
Well put.
Right. I can only agree with that.
Sounds good. Okay, if we all agree, then I'm going to sneak in another question while we're here. So I have two comments. I'll read them. One is from Sue. Sue says, the work ethic assumes that everyone has a wife at home to take care of chores, finances, social relationships, etc., while the researcher dedicates themselves 200% to research. It's disastrous for women, but not great for people of any gender. That is true, Sue. Thanks for noting that. And Deb says, things may be better for women faculty, but I don't see them being better for women graduate students at MIT, especially in engineering. Are there any thoughts on this? And I just want to add a tack on to Deb's question. I'm not sure if the professors here are aware of the Graduate Students Union. I think that is a cry for help, not just on the women's side, but more broadly for graduate students at MIT. So this question focuses more on graduate students than women faculty, especially in engineering. Do you have any thoughts, any comments on this question?
Obviously, well, that's a priority to work on to increase the equity and the experience of women graduate students. It's absolutely critical. You know, I think that it's a major focus, and it may be lagging behind in the improvements we see in the women faculty members, but it's definitely a huge priority.
Thank you. That was our last question. I'll just say that even though I'm not, a faculty member, I get to listen in sometimes, and I know that the graduate student experience at MIT is currently a top priority for the administration, and there's a recognition that it can be better in terms of supporting graduate students, and a real commitment to invest in that. So before my closing remarks, I just want to say I know we had some problems connecting. Some people had problems connecting to the live stream, and so our staff will keep the archive video on this page for a day or two, so you can replay the conversation if you like. But on behalf of the MIT Alumni Association and the MIT Press, thank you all for tuning in to this special event. Thanks to our panelists, Mandana Sassanfar, Penny Chisholm, Sylvia Sire, and Angie Belcher for their time today. And thanks to Jessica Quay for co-moderating with me. We have a recording of this broadcast, then we'll make it available on the MI Alumni Association YouTube channel within a week's time. And please send any feedback about today's event to alumnilearn, one word, at mit.edu. So thanks again to the audience, the participants, and the panelists, and to the Alumni Association for hosting. Good evening.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.